This is Fred Richani, TSC, your home for MMA news updates, interviews, and everything in between. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. We just witnessed Anderson, the Spider, Silva turning back the clock. And it was an incredible effort against Israel Adesanya, the last style bender. Anderson Silva lost via unanimous decision, but he was competitive against a guy who is now 16-0 and in prime contention, in prime position for a UFC middleweight championship shot. Think about that. 43 years old, had some taintedness on his career due to that failed drug test a few years back against Nick Diaz. This guy, he looked okay. You know, you look at some of Anderson Silva's most recent fights, he was all right. He posed a bit of a danger to Daniel Cormier on last notice in 2016. Against Derek Brunson, he won via unanimous decision, although in years past, the old Anderson would have destroyed Derek Brunson. And this was Anderson's first fight since February of 2017. Damn, 2 years, if you really think about it. It's been quite a long time. But he came in here. He played some mind games with Israel. He kept his hands down. He took some of Israel's best shots to the body, to the legs, to the dome, even had his eye swell up due to a kick. And he still came out looking great. And as far as I'm concerned, while Israel was made a star in some ways, I do think it was Anderson that actually remade himself into a contender and a marketable fighter for the UFC. And not just somebody that's a legend on the card and the co-main event, but somebody that may be on ESPN, maybe at a future pay-per-view, you can headline once more. And I know he lost. Israel was a lot more active. You know, he hit some more significant strikes. But Anderson was absolutely, positively in that fight. So the future is bright for Israel Adesanya. Maybe he'll face Robert Whittaker. But in the meantime, we got to celebrate Anderson Silva, man, because that guy's doing some amazing things at age 43. But some people that are just tuning in may be wondering right now, wait, Fred, why aren't you talking about Robert Whittaker versus Kelvin Gastelum, right? The middleweight title fight. That was supposed to be the main event. Well, unfortunately, poor Robert Whittaker, this guy, Australian native, this is the UFC 234 taking place in Australia. This poor guy cannot buy any luck except maybe bad luck. Anytime he's supposed to fight in Australia, seems to be getting hurt, seems to be getting injured. I know a couple years ago he battled a myriad of injuries, which he profiled in numerous interviews, and he had an abdominal hernia that was discovered. Dana White told ESPN the doctors have never seen anything like this in a guy so young, which is pretty damn alarming. And so he had to pull out. Kelvin Gastelum, he decided to play the pro wrestling heel, put the fake UFC belt on his shoulder, called himself the real champion. Adesanya called out Gastelum, said, hey, man, take that belt off. And he said, at least I showed up to work, which, of course, the Australian fans saw as a dig to their son, Whittaker. And, yeah, I will say this. Anderson, the legend, made himself a contender again. Israel Adesanya further catapulted himself into superstardom, although I don't think a lot of people bought this show. Kelvin Gastelum turned himself heel, and Robert Whittaker, well, he's still around somehow, but he's probably the least popular of the four right now, which is crazy to think about. And it's funny, for any pro wrestling fans that have watched in the past Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior, you'll remember Hulk Hogan put over Ultimate Warrior back in the day at WrestleMania 6. And Ultimate Warrior was set to take the torch from Hogan. Now, due to a number of circumstances, many of which included his talent compared to Hulk Hogan, he did not become Hulk Hogan or the next Hulk Hogan, and he kind of flamed out after a while. Now, you'll remember, if you watch WrestleMania 6, that Hulk Hogan, after endorsing Ultimate Warrior in the ring, stayed longer in the ring and soaked up the cheers and looked teary-eyed. And, of course, Anderson the night before was crying at the weigh-ins. And it's just funny. I thought about that. And I know it wasn't intentional by Anderson Silva, but in a fight and in a whole pay-per-view that was set to make Israel Adesanya a star, I ended up making Anderson Silva a sympathetic figure and somebody that you want to see fight again. And it made me not feel sad to watch Anderson. Not at all, because I'm thinking about this. He was competitive against the guy that they're calling the middleweight Conor McGregor, or the potential middleweight Conor McGregor. So what's next for him? Well, there's another guy that I think people have forgotten in the middleweight division. His name is Jacare Souza, who's maybe the greatest UFC fighter to never win a title in the UFC, other than maybe Donald Cowboy Cerrone, who was in the crowd, who did a shoey, which is drinking alcohol out of a shoe, like that. It's an Australian thing. I don't know. I'll have to ask my Australian friends about that one, but you won't see me doing that. So, will Silva actually fight Jacare? I don't know if they'd fight each other. Whoops. Getting a news alert here. I don't think Silva and Jacare would actually fight each other. So if those guys don't fight each other, who do you put in against Anderson Silva? Well, let's see. Anderson's now going to be coming off of a loss. Who's another guy who's a big name that Anderson can fight that also happens to be coming out of a loss? Who's somebody that could interest people in a fight with Anderson Silva now that he's 43? Oh, I got one. Chris Weidman. A few years ago, I'd say, hell no, I don't want to see Chris Weidman fight Anderson Silva again. I don't want to see that happen to my man Anderson Silva. But Chris Weidman's had some serious bad luck since that Silva fight. Chris Weidman coming off of several devastating, heartbreaking losses. What better fight for both men than Silva versus Weidman 3? Say what you want about the two fights where, Weidman did win. I thought he won fair and square, of course. But there are a lot of people, there's a segment of MMA fans, hardcore Anderson the Spider Silva fans, that'll still say, you know what? If Anderson didn't clown around in the first fight, he might have won. If Anderson Silva didn't break his leg in the second fight, he might have won. So I would actually be intrigued with that fight. And, I don't know what that says. I don't know if that says good things about Silva or bad things about Weidman, given how far he's fallen. But I think that'd be an incredibly intriguing fight. Now, you could also do one of the original fights they tried to make before I believe Anderson Silva was flagged again, for some type of violation or some shadiness or whatever by USADA. I don't even know what the hell's going on with USADA anymore post John Jones. But, you could have him face Kelvin Gastelum. I know they were looking to do that fight. That would be interesting, but, I don't know. I think Kelvin now walking around with the UFC belt, unless you're going to book him in a fight where there's an interim title on the line or the actual title on the line, I'd keep him away from the Silva fight. So I would actually like to see Silva versus Jacare, but if they don't want to fight each other, if that fight can't materialize, I think Weidman versus Silva would be awesome. But the official result as of tonight, though, is the last style bender, Israel Adesanya, defeating Anderson Silva in a very competitive fight, 29-28, 30-27, 30-27, defeating the legend, the former middleweight champion, via unanimous decision. This card got ransacked after that title fight being taken off because I'm going to keep it real, you guys. I didn't have a chance to really watch most of the prelims, and the main card did not interest me that much. And unless you're somebody like me that covers this stuff or is a hardcore fan, I couldn't blame you if you don't want to plop down $60 to watch this. But in the co-main event, Lando Venata, who's a fun fighter to watch, not fun to fight if you're Tony Ferguson and other guys who have fought him, defeated some dude named Marcos Mariano via Kimura in round number 1. Ricky Simone had an awesome performance against longtime vet Haniyaya, 30-27, 30-27, 30-25. Montana De La Rosa defeated Nadia Kasim via submission with an armbar in round number 2. And then she cut a promo talking about how she'd like to get paid like a top 10 fighter. And I know UFC's making all this money. I know UFC has their own pay scale, but it's 2019. They got a bajillion dollar ESPN deal. It looks really bad when you got fighters on your pay-per-views complaining about pay. And this ain't Le'Veon Bell, getting paid $14 million for 1 year and looking for, $23 million guaranteed. This is a woman that's probably not making a whole lot of money to even cover her fight camp or manager and anything else. So UFC, you better get on that. Although I'm not going to be holding my breath here. We had Jimmy Crute, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I don't remember. Defeating Smiling Sam Alvey via TKO in round number 1. So he did us all a favor. Devontae Smith defeated Dong Hyung Ma via TKO. Shane Young in round number 1. Shane Young defeated Austin Arnett via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. Kai Kara France defeated Horlian Paiva via split decision, 28-29, 29-28, 29-28. We had Hyung Ho Kang defeat Teruto Ishihara via rear naked choke in round number 1. I'm getting there. Jalen Turner beat some dude named Cowan Potter via knockout in round number 1. And then some guy named Jonathan Martinez beat Wiluji Buren via unanimous decision. Yeah, a lot of anonymous fighters here. If you wanted to do any research on these fighters, you couldn't find them on Wikipedia. You had to go to SureDog or, the mixedmartialarts.com website, to find anything. Actually, let me pull up the Wikipedia page right now, just for fun. Let's go to the Wikipedia page. Okay. The number of people on this show with no Wikipedia pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 fighters on this pay-per-view with no Wikipedia pages. And on the actual pay-per-view, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 out of 10 fighters that fought on the actual pay-per-view card don't have a Wikipedia page. But overall, I mean, from what I saw on the main card, on the pay-per-view itself, I was entertained. I do wish Silva and Adesanya was 5 rounds, but you know, it's unless you're paying these guys stupid money to do 5 rounds, it is a tough ask for dudes that were training for 3, and a lot of fighters will tell you that. Hell, Donald Cerrone, though, even offered to freaking step in against Kelvin Gastelum, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So what is next for UFC, people? Well, it is the return, the long-awaited return of Cain Velasquez to take on Francis Ngannou. Cain Velasquez has not fought since he defeated Travis Brown via TKO in July of 2016. If you don't remember what that was, UFC 200. In case you're wondering, we're going to be up to UFC 235. So it's been quite a long time. I actually still favor Cain in this fight. I think he could take down Ngannou and smother him and kick his ass. But Ngannou in that first round is one dangerous dude. So Ngannou and Velasquez headlines that show. Co-main event is James Vick against Paul Felder, which should be one heck of a fight. On the preliminary card, I'm surprised this isn't on the freaking, ESPN Plus at least, or on the main card. Jimmy Rivera and Aljamain Sterling. Wow. That's actually a pretty big fight, I think, on the prelims for UFC and ESPN. And by the way, this is the first UFC on ESPN show. There's been ESPN prelims. There was the Dillashaw and Cejudo fight, which actually took place on ESPN Plus, the streaming service. But UFC and ESPN 1, easy for me to say. The Ngannou Velasquez fight will be the first main event actually on ESPN. Confusing? Yeah, I'm confused too. And then the next one that we have is going to be Jan Blachowicz versus Thiago Santos. And then we go from there and we get to UFC 235, and that's the big one. John Bones Jones against Anthony Smith. Not the kid I went to high school with. That guy was black and this guy's white. A little confusing for me, but hey, I guess it's a common name. The co-main event is Tyron Woodley defending his welterweight title against Kamaru Usman. I'm fine with that fight. Looks awesome on paper, but I'm just very confused what the hell they did with RDA and Colby Covington last year, creating that fake belt, bringing him to the White House, showing it off with Donald Trump, and then he doesn't get the title shot? What? But yeah, AL fan here on the live stream says UFC 235 looks epic. It certainly does. Rapture Record says Prime Silva would have beaten Adesanya. I don't know, but he would have definitely given him some more trouble. But it was still a great fight, and I would have loved to have seen 5 rounds. Anderson looked a little tired, but again, he was competitive as hell with a guy who could be the next middleweight champion. So what does that say? But also on UFC 235. So Jones versus Anthony Smith. Smith's a huge underdog, obviously. Woodley versus Kamaru Usman. USADA and Vada versus John Jones. Actually, that one's on the prelims. Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren. That's a weird-ass fight. And as far as Ben Askren goes, I like the guy a lot in Bellator. I enjoy his trash talk. I like him as a wrestler, too. But, he was retired. Now he's back. And they traded him for Demetrius Johnson. I'd say it's a bit of a downgrade, but I could be wrong here. But that fight could go either way. Tisha Torres and Weili Zhang. Tisha Torres is always an awesome fighter to watch. Cody Garbrandt and Pedro Munoz should be one heck of a fight. Zabit's taking on Jeremy Stevens on the main event of the ESPN prelims. So yeah, some really good fights on this card. Diego Sanchez and Mickey Gall. That could be a sleeper fight right there, even though I know Diego's like 50 years old now. So overall, a lot of UFC action coming your way. That's not even including Bellator and some other organizations. And then actually after that, might as well while we're here, Junior Dos Santos and Derek Lewis. So in exactly 1 month, or actually a little less than 1 month now, Derek Lewis and Junior Dos Santos. So yeah, going to be an action-packed year for the UFC. UFC 235 could be the card of the year up to this point, although I don't know if that's really saying much due to the injuries and everything. Mike Bond on Twitter noted that the card, the shifting of the card, the main event change was already the 4th main event change for the UFC in 2019. Already! Which is just crazy to think about. But overall, I got to say, from an action standpoint, from an MMA moment standpoint, to see the past and present with the future, yeah, that was pretty epic. But folks, I want to hear from you. What do you think about UFC 235? Did you think Silva versus Adesanya delivered? Would you actually like to see a rematch? Because I kind of would at 5 rounds. Let me know. Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this update, please like, share, take care. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, and all major podcast sites. If you'd like to get any live notifications, you can enable them on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube and enable notifications there. Easiest way to do that, and you can check out all our interviews with any MMA legend that you've seen before. Well, maybe not any, but almost any legend. Dan the Beast Severin, Ken Shamrock, Frank Shamrock. I actually got a new interview with Frank Shamrock coming up. Tito Ortiz. You name it, we got it. Until next time, everybody, as always, enjoy the fights. Stylebender. Nice one, bro.